Epic Game Store. It launched back in December of 2018, so it's been 7 years since that storefront's release. And its purpose was to be a competitor to Steam, which is kind of the dominating launcher and storefront for PC gaming. And Epic Game Store offered better deals for developers who get to keep a bigger cut of the revenue share. And Epic Game Store also offers like free games every week. And despite all of this, Epic Game Store is woefully behind Steam. And if we look at recent data, the way Epic Game Store is trending is not particularly confidence-inspiring, as what we're seeing is a storefront that has stagnated when it comes to people actually making purchases on Epic Game Store, while Steam continues to thrive and continues to achieve new records. And what it ultimately came down to is that while Epic Game Store does offer better revenue share for developers and offers free games every week, the storefront itself, the launcher, and the feature set that it offers are just really not up to par. That's the reason why Epic Game Store's launch didn't go down well, and why even after 7 years, Epic Game Store is woefully behind Steam. Not to mention that Epic Game Store over the years pissed off a lot of people by essentially buying out exclusivity for third-party games, a strategy that ultimately ended up doing more harm to them than good. And even in recent months and years, it feels like Steam just doesn't really have to do anything because Epic Game Store, Tim Sweeney in particular, CEO of Epic, keep shooting Epic Game Store in the foot. For example, one of the things that garnered a lot of backlash and lost a lot of goodwill surrounding Epic Game Store is the fact that Epic boss Tim Sweeney thought that stores like Steam should stop labeling games as being made with AI. And I mean, this is just something that garnered a lot of backlash because people actually appreciate the fact that Steam is enforcing consumers and customers being informed and having disclosures that allow them to make informed decisions. The fact that Tim Sweeney is against that just made people perceive Steam as just standing there doing nothing and just doing their thing, and competitors blasting themselves in the face with a shotgun. The goodwill surrounding Epic Game Store is so negative that people are expressing online that they would rather buy games that are free on Epic Game Store on Steam on sale than to play them for free through the Epic Game Store. This GIF, this meme, for example, made the rounds. Free games on Epic Games. And it's the Punisher just going through it. And then same game, but 70% on Steam. And it's just John Bernthal living his best life. So that's something that's become a widely popular sentiment across the PC gaming landscape. But what all this revealed is that meme is actually no exaggeration, because there's tangible data showing that realistically, this is actually what is going on, as revealed here by none other than Dave Oshry, also known as the New Blood guy. He's the CEO of New Blood. And what he revealed is that Epic Game Store is actually boosting Steam sales by hosting their free games on that platform. It's actually pretty wild. And if true over the long term, Epic Game Store is in a lot of trouble with little chance to catch up. Now, while we're on the topic of being in trouble, there's nothing quite like the fear that strikes when you lose your wallet or you know that your wallet was stolen, which is where the sponsor of today's video comes in, Bullstrap, makers of high-quality cases, wallets, and travel gear. What I've got for you right here is the Leather Nav Messenger wallet, and there are a few things about it that makes it stand out, starting with its compact form factor. As someone who doesn't carry around a ton of cash and primarily relies on cards, this wallet makes it super easy to store all of my most important cards, as well as unobtrusively stowed away in my pocket. With how thin it is, you'll barely feel like the wallet is there. Bullstrap is also focused on ensuring that you never lose your wallet thanks to its discreetly placed smart finder, allowing you to connect it to Apple devices and use the Find My app to pinpoint its location. There's nothing quite like the freak out of forgetting where you put your wallet, or worse yet, knowing that your wallet was stolen. This feature ensures you never have to worry about that again. The Smart Finder's battery is also rechargeable via wireless charging, and one charge can last anywhere from 6 to 8 months. And then there's the quality of the materials itself, with the full-grain leather feeling both really durable and also really good and premium in the hands. I also love the color options that they have, namely this ocean color that offers this really nice shade of like bluish green that I think looks really great. If you're looking for a new wallet and need something that's compact, secure, and premium, you can grab yours right now and get 15% off by using my link and code in the description and comment section below. All right, so let's get back to the topic at hand. The way Epic Games Store is not only woefully behind Steam, but also boosting Steam in a lot of ways when they try to, use methodologies that they hope will garner audiences for their game store. So Dave Oshry tweeted the following about something he discovered when he engaged with Epic Games Store and Steam as a developer. Quote, Blood West was free on Epic Games Store over the holidays and sold like 200% more on Steam that day. Dave continued by expressing how surprised he was because he used to think that Epic Games Store was a marketing black hole. But as it turns out, having your game be free on Epic is great advertising for Steam sales. And you can see right here in sales charts highlighting how the second that the game became free on Epic Games Store that week, we saw a huge spike in sales for that title. Dave continues here, New Blood doesn't get any royalties from Epic Games Store. We let Hyperstrange take 100% of that, Hyperstrange being one of the developers that they partnered with. So they got the money back for the free giveaway, are putting that money into developing the new DLC, and we got more Steam sales too. So, that's a W across the board, except for Epic Games Store. It's bad for a competitor when they try to pull a move that is meant to be beneficial to them, but it ends up being actually beneficial to the competition. They've also made it a point to highlight that, Epic Games Store kind of dug their own grave, and somebody replied with, not trying to hate on Epic, but their launcher is absolutely awful. If it didn't take years to update a game like Fortnite, even with a good internet, I would consider giving it another chance. And that's just one of many issues on top of all of the missing features that Epic Games Store has yet to catch up to. And so Dave responded just very honestly with everything bad about Epic Games Store is their own fault. Dave also addressed the way Tim Sweeney is constantly dogging on Steam for that 30% revenue cut. In response to somebody saying, this is why I laugh when people argue over the Steam 30% cut for developers. 70% of a sale is better than no sale. And Dave agreed, saying, I did an interview today and I said Epic could give developers 100% of sales, and it doesn't matter shit if there's no sales, LOL. What's 100% of $0? $0. And that's really the core issue with Epic Games Store. No matter how good the deals are, if the storefront itself, if the launcher, if the software isn't up to par with the competition to the point where it will pull people away from Steam into Epic Games Store, no amount of deals will ultimately change the fact that people are not engaging with Epic Games Store, not spending money on Epic Games Store, not buying games on Epic Games Store. Don't get me wrong, if people want to argue about the 30% cut, that's within your prerogative. But what Steam ultimately excels at is having a great environment for customers that brings people to that storefront, that allows developers to sell their games, even if they have to give away 30% of the revenue to Steam. It's still a very viable business due to the huge audience that Steam hosts. I think Epic Games Store just relied on the better revenue cut and the weekly free games as things that could by themselves carry Epic Games Store without considering the fact that the storefront itself and the launcher itself has to be exceptional to pull people away from Steam. Again, people like Steam so much more than Epic Games Store that they would rather buy games on Steam than get them for free on Epic. And the disparity between Epic Games Store and Steam is something that persists today. Even news outlets like PC Gamer here published a following article on January of 2024 rating all the different PC storefronts, and Steam is still top dog and they gave it a 90%. Epic Games Store, they gave a 41% because of all of the missing features and all of the areas in which Epic Games Store just woefully falls short. Hell, back in May of 2025, even Tim Sweeney admitted that the reason people characterize the Epic Games launcher as clunky is because the Epic Games launcher is clunky. This is literally a word-for-word quote from Tim Sweeney. So there's some self-awareness, but there's no action to rectify the awareness of these issues. Now, Tim Sweeney got wind of word spreading about the way Epic Games Store's giveaways are actually encouraging Steam sales, and he responded to that by saying and tweeting the following. Epic and Steam compete for each customer and each sale. On some transactions, Epic wins. On more, Steam wins. But one thing is constant on every transaction: gamers and developers win by having more options and better deals. A rather hypocritical statement coming from Tim Sweeney, given that he was a huge proponent for Epic Games Store securing exclusives, thereby removing choice for people. Scrolling down, he continues with, though Epic processes only around 7% as many third-party payments as Steam, that vastly underreports economic activity, as developers on Epic Games Store are free to process their own payments and keep 100%, and many major games like GTA do so. Basically trying to make the point that Steam, even for microtransactions, they take 30% of that revenue, while Epic Games Store allows developers to keep 100% of microtransactions. Sure, games that are already popular and have vast amounts of microtransactions in them will benefit from that, but there are a lot of games that are not live services that don't have recurrent monetization and that ultimately don't benefit from the bigger revenue cut that Epic Games Store offers, because their games just don't sell very well on Epic Games Store compared to Steam. And then Tim Sweeney finishes off with, the more telling number is monthly active users, where Epic Games Store is 55 to 60% the size of Steam. We heavily reinvest back into engaging users through the free games program, putting our revenue back to work for developers in a way that those yachts and diamond teeths don't. But worth noting is that the way Tim Sweeney presents monthly active users is actually misleading, because when it comes to like whether a game store is thriving or not, it's not about the number of users, it's how many of those users are actually engaging with the games and the storefront. Like how many of those users are actually buying games and playing them and making it a thriving ecosystem from a monetization standpoint. And that's where Epic Games Store is actually not doing very well, as highlighted by this chart right here, showing that Epic Games Store's user base is indeed growing. But when it comes to third-party game revenue, you can see right here that not only did it plateau, but it's actually started to dip since 2022. We are talking about a 173% growth on total Epic Games Store PC users, but only a 1.6% growth of third-party game revenue over the course of many years. There are two things that are fueling Epic Games Store's overall user base, and that's number one, Fortnite, which is the biggest driver of users on Epic. And then two, it's the free games, but what people are essentially doing, as this chart shows, is they're coming in, grabbing the free games, and then leaving. And a lot of people report that even when they grab the free games, they don't actually engage with them all that much. So yeah, people are collecting these free games just in case they want an avenue to play them, but a lot of people just still prefer to engage with Steam and to pay money and spend money on Steam, because the experience of using Steam to play games is literally just that much better than Epic Games Store. And that's really the core issue with Epic Games Store. It's not a good product. No matter how many deals you offer for your product, if the product itself isn't good, then the deals don't really matter. It doesn't matter that you give better revenue share to developers. It doesn't matter that you're giving free games every week, because using the core product, the most important part of the product, it's just not anywhere close to what it's like to use competitors like Steam. Somebody else aptly highlighted here that what this chart represents is that while there are a lot of new accounts being created, none of them are actually spending money on third-party games. That's the aspect where Epic Games Store hasn't seen growth, suggesting that while Fortnite and free games are popular, the actual spending money on games in Epic Games Store and playing those games in Epic Games Store, that's an area where Epic Games Store is not doing all that hot. The complete opposite could be said about Steam, or if you look at the Steam concurrent player numbers right now, like it's tens of millions concurrently online, playing games that they're not only engaging with, but that they're also like happily purchasing, that they prefer to purchase on Steam because this platform and this launcher is just so ideal and perfect in the way it functions and the features that it has in all of the ways it's been fleshed out over the years. And that's the main difference between the statistics that Tim Sweeney is presenting versus just looking at Steam charts. Saying that we have a lot of users doesn't account for the activity on the storefront itself. Whereas when you look at Steam charts and look at how many people are concurrently playing, those are sales and that's engagement that Epic Games Store is not seeing. That's the more important data right there. And in fact, Steam's doing so well that earlier this year, on January 13th, 2026, it was reported that Steam achieved a new concurrent player record, clearing 42 million players playing all at once using the Steam platform. Insane. All Epic Games Store has are people who are signing up to play Fortnite or to get free games, but not actually spending money to buy games, which makes it a worse proposition for developers, even if they get a bigger revenue share. because a bigger revenue share of low sales is not as good as the massive sales you can achieve on Steam, even if it means giving a little more revenue share to Steam. Even developers from Larian, the developers of Baldur's Gate 3 and the upcoming Divinity, chimed in saying that they don't particularly like the way Tim Sweeney is framing all of this. Quote tweeting the tweet from Tim Sweeney talking about how, gamers win when they have more choice or whatever, and trying to paint Epic in a better light compared to Steam. So the Larian developer here talks about Alan Wake 2 and the way that game was severely negatively impacted by Epic Games Store, stating, "I understand Epic entirely funded Alan Wake 2, but this altruistic pro-developer talk doesn't sit well when Remedy seemingly went into financial crisis because they couldn't tap Steam for Alan Wake 2 sales, suffering potential hundreds of millions in lost revenue." For all of Tim Sweeney's talks about gamers and developers winning by having more options and better deals, what Tim did was reduce options to the developers by tying games like Alan Wake 2 down to the Epic Games Store via exclusivity deals, and he gave gamers less options by forcing people to engage with the Epic Games Store to play Alan Wake 2. Again, it's very hypocritical, and it's ultimately a model that for a game like Alan Wake 2, it actually ended up hurting the game because it could not take advantage of the mass audience that is on Steam due to the exclusivity deal. The Larian developer continues, "Not that they need the money, but a percent take to Epic could have recouped developer costs and more. Competition is good and important, but it is difficult to buy the message when there are demonstrable cases of games underperforming as a result of the tactic, as a result of Epic Games Store's specific tactic. Ultimately, the viability of the store sits on their ability to convert hundreds of millions of Fortnite players into mid-hardcore premium gamers, and also to convert a bunch of Steam players and users into Epic Games Store users, and that's definitely not happening. And I don't see the Fortnite brand attempting to do that, so it's like, shrug. Maybe if there was a shit-hot Unreal tournament or something." And then he talks about why just having free weekly games just isn't enough to spruce up Epic Games Store, saying that the Apple and Google stores spent a decade devaluing games and apps to a point where it is largely impossible to sell a premium game there in a way that doesn't massively devalue it on other systems. Giving everyone everything for free might bump numbers, but doesn't create a viable storefront from which to sell premium experiences. And yeah, below people are highlighting the hypocrisy of Epic Games Store, talking about gamers and developers winning by having more options, only to restrict those options. And so the Larian developer responded with, "Building more options by removing options is a bold tactic. I like the pressure they're putting on payment providers and rev split though, but the former is probably better attributed to them than the latter." So yeah, this is where we're at with Epic Games Store. While the number of users is growing, the number of those people who are engaging with the storefront itself has completely plateaued. And Tim Sweeney has not done Epic Games Store any favors. It feels like every time he opens his mouth or every time he, posts a tweet on Twitter trying to talk about Steam and Epic and the competition and whatever, that's when Tim Sweeney just gets roasted and only brings more bad will to the Epic Games Store, and it makes people want to use Epic Games Store less. People feel like Tim Sweeney isn't actually listening to the real issues surrounding Epic Games Store, but trying to wag the finger at Steam and present Epic as the option that does everything better. But the reality is that, again, no matter what better deals you present, if your product sucks, then people won't want to use that product. And if people don't use that product, then no amount of deals matter. On top of the fact that Epic Games Store, for all of the righteousness that they try to present themselves at, ultimately it has done harm to a lot of developers in certain scenarios, especially where exclusivity is concerned, situations like Alan Wake 2. So yeah, engagement surrounding Epic Games Store storefront is incredibly poor, while Steam is just continuing to skyrocket and thrive. And also goodwill and optics surrounding Epic Games Store, I think, are some of the worst it's ever been, and it already wasn't great at launch. So yeah, I'll be curious to see if there are plans to spruce up Epic Games Store or just stick with the same old strategy of hoping that free games will lure people into the Epic Games Store. But, while it is luring them to the store, it's not retaining them. It's not making them fall in love with the ecosystem of Epic Games Store, because that ecosystem is still not good. And so long as that doesn't change, Epic Games Store will be more of a money sink than anything. This feels like a venture that's currently more of a loss than a gain, though with Fortnite being able to support Epic Games Store's ventures, no doubt it's something that Tim Sweeney will continue to push for. But whether at any point we are going to see improvements to Epic Games Store to a degree where people can start looking at it more positively, that's the big question. That's what's not happening, and that's why Steam continues to dominate. even with its 30% revenue share. That does go down as you sell more units and as you make more revenue, down to I think 20% or something. But it's higher than Epic Games Store, but at least games sell on Steam compared to Epic Games Store, significantly more. And so developers would rather stick with Steam. So yeah, there you have it, folks. This is kind of the state of Epic Games Store, and it's pretty sad, the fact that after 7 years, it feels like not a whole lot of progress has been made. Though who knows what the future holds. I'm someone who encourages competition. If someone can compete against Steam and do it properly, I welcome that, because that means Steam has to keep one-upping. They can't get complacent because they might get surpassed. So I welcome that level of competition. It's just Epic Games Store didn't do it very well. When it was first announced, it felt like they had all of the right ingredients, but the execution was just not very good. And so, yeah, Steam just continues to be a better product. That's why people are gravitating towards it, and that's really what it comes down to. But I'd love to hear what your thoughts and opinions are on all of this in the comments below. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.